For Christmas, my parents handed me a self-help book titled How to Grow Up. My sister, meanwhile, unwrapped a shiny camera and tickets to South America. I took their advice by morning. The police were at their door, and their voices were shaking. I live in a small Vermont town where winter arrives early and lingers like an old friend who doesn't know when to leave. That morning, the snow was falling in lazy, soft flakes, covering the narrow streets and the sloped roofs of houses I'd known my whole life. Main Street was dressed for the holidays, garlands hanging from lampposts, the scent of cinnamon drifting out from the little cafe on the corner. I could hear the church bell striking 9 as I walked past the post office, nodding to Mrs. Henderson, who has been working there since before I could read. Most people here know me as Miss Turner, the elementary school teacher who decorates her classroom like a storybook. I've been teaching for over a decade, and I still get a rush every time I see a child's face light up when they finally understand something they've been struggling with. My classroom walls are a riot of color construction paper collages, watercolor paintings, and small clay animals that wobble on the shelves. I weave games into my lessons and turn history into adventures because children learn better when they feel like they're part of the story. Patience has become my second nature. I can tie shoelaces while reciting multiplication tables, comfort a child in tears without pausing mid-sentence, and coax even the shyest student into raising their hand. My colleagues joke that I have an endless supply of energy, though I've learned that's not entirely true. I just know how to hide the moments when it runs out. I laugh often. I create constantly. But I also know the quiet sting of being underestimated. To my parents, teaching was never a real career. They treated it as a temporary stop, something I'd do until I found a serious job or got married and settled down. They've never said it outright in cruel words. But it's there in the pauses, in the quick change of subject, when I talk about my students, in the way my accomplishments are met with polite nods rather than applause. The truth is, that quiet dismissal has been there since I was old enough to notice. I used to think I could bridge that gap between us. But lately, I've started to wonder if some distances aren't meant to be crossed at all. The Christmas party was already in full swing when I arrived. The golden light from the living room spilled into the hallway, carrying with it the faint scent of gingerbread and pine. The tree stood in the corner, its branches heavy with ornaments collected over decades, some glass and shimmering, others lopsided creations from our childhood, still hanging as if time hadn't moved. Laughter and music mingled in the air, and for a moment, I almost forgot the little knots of tension that usually came with these gatherings. The adults clustered in the living room, drinks in hand, trading stories about vacations and job promotions. The kids had claimed a corner by the fireplace, sprawled on the floor with toys and candy wrappers scattered around them. Sophie was in the center of it all, her smile as polished as ever, hair perfectly styled even in the dry winter air. She had a way of drawing attention without asking for it. When Mom handed her a large, neatly wrapped box, the room seemed to lean in. Sophie peeled back the paper with deliberate slowness, the way someone does when they know everyone is watching. Inside was a sleek travel camera, the kind professionals use. Along with an envelope, she pulled out a pair of plane tickets, her eyes widening just enough to look surprised. The room erupted into cheers and congratulations. Mom and Dad beamed, telling everyone how Sophie would be traveling through South America for her media program, capturing photographs for her portfolio. There was pride in their voices, warm and undeniable. Then came my turn, a smaller package, light in my hands. The wrapping paper crinkled softly as I tore it open. Inside was a hardback book with glossy lettering on the cover, How to Grow Up. For a moment, I didn't quite process it. The title sat there, bold and unblinking, like it had been waiting for this exact moment to humiliate me. When I looked up, every pair of eyes was on me. Dad gave a half smile, the kind that never reached his eyes. Thought you might find a few useful lessons in there, he said, his voice light but edged. A few people chuckled quietly. I smiled. Because that's what I do. I said thank you. Because that's what's expected. My fingers closed around the book a little too tightly, the hardcover pressing into my palm. Around me. The party went on, but the sound of the music and chatter blurred, like someone had turned down the volume on the world. My gaze drifted to the blinking lights on the tree, and for a moment, I couldn't tell if I was holding my breath or just forgetting to breathe at all. By the time I got home, the snow had stopped, leaving a thin white crust on the driveway. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you notice the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. I set the book on the kitchen table, its glossy cover catching the warm light from the pendant lamp overhead. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it, as if it might offer an explanation for itself. The room felt bigger than usual. Too. I pulled off my coat and scarf, hanging them on the hook by the door, and let myself sink into a chair. My hands rested on the table, fingertips brushing the edge of the book. Something about that gesture felt final, like putting down more than just an object, maybe putting down years of something I couldn't quite name. My mind wandered back to the year Sophie got her first MacBook. I had been 28. They're working extra hours, tutoring after school to save for a summer trip I never ended up taking. At the Christmas party that year, Sophie unwrapped the silver laptop while I opened an envelope. Inside was a neatly typed list of things you could help out with around the house. I remember forcing a smile, nodding as Mom explained how every little bit helps the family. The room had applauded Sophie's bright future. While my contribution was measured in chores, another memory rose. Uninvited. A text from Mom on a Tuesday afternoon, asking if I could transfer some money to cover Sophie's tuition balance before the deadline. We'll pay you back, she'd said. Though we both knew they wouldn't, I did it without a second thought. Because that's what I did. I told myself it was easier than saying no. Easier than the inevitable argument. And then there was the night I'd been looking forward to for months, a symphony performance I'd bought tickets to with a friend. That afternoon, Sophie called in a panic. She'd been offered an unexpected work trip and needed someone to watch Lily for the weekend. Mom's voice came over the line a minute later. Sweet, but expectant. You're so good with her, she said, as if that made it less of an imposition. I canceled my plans, texted my friend a quick apology, and spent the evening making macaroni and cheese while the sound of the concert played faintly in my imagination. I sat there in my kitchen, the memories layering over one another until it was hard to tell where one ended and another began. My thumb ran along the edge of the book, like I was tracing a line I didn't want to cross again. I realized then that my life had been a long series of quiet concessions, decisions to step back, so someone else could step forward. I had gotten so used to giving that I'd forgotten no one had ever asked me if I wanted to. And they certainly hadn't been in any rush to thank me for it. I must have sat at the kitchen table for nearly an hour before I finally reached for my phone. It felt heavier than usual, as if it already knew what I was about to do. The glow of the screen lit my face, and I opened the message app, my thumbs hovering over the keyboard. The first draft spilled out quickly. Too quickly. It sounded sharp. Defensive. The kind of text you send when you're still burning from old wounds. I deleted it in one long swipe. I tried again, this time softening my words. But it felt like I was apologizing for something I hadn't done wrong. Delete. Type. Delete. My tea went cold beside me. But I didn't notice. Each sentence felt like it carried the weight of years, and I wanted every word to stand on its own 2 feet. Eventually, I wrote something that felt like the truth, and nothing but the truth. From now on, I won't be providing financial support or watching Lily on weekends. I need to focus on my own life. I stared at it, my heart thudding in my ears. There was no malice in it. No bitterness. Just a line drawn in the sand. My finger hovered over the send button longer than I'd like to admit. I thought about Christmas mornings, Sunday dinners, birthday cakes, all the things that might never feel the same after this message. But then I thought about the nights I had gone to bed bone-tired, and the mornings I woke up already behind on my own life, because I was living too much of theirs. I pressed send. The little delivered checkmark appeared instantly, but the replies came faster than I expected. Mom's name popped up first. "You're being selfish. This isn't how we raised you." I read it twice, the words settling over me like frost. Sophie's message followed almost immediately. "You always make everything so dramatic just to get attention." For a moment, I almost responded, almost explained, almost justified. But I caught myself. I had sent my message. It said exactly what I meant. Anything else would just be reopening a wound. I was finally letting close. I set the phone face down on the table. Outside, the wind rattled the branches against the window. But inside, the room felt still, almost unnaturally so. My pulse was racing. Though on the outside, I was as calm as I'd been all day. If someone had walked in, they might have thought I was simply enjoying the quiet. But inside, it felt like my ribs were a cage too small for my own heartbeat. I got up and started washing the mug from my untouched tea. The warm water ran over my hands, grounding me. I caught my reflection in the kitchen window, eyes steady, lips pressed into a line that was neither smile nor frown. Not relief. Not yet. But resolve. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that sits quietly in the corner and refuses to move. The phone buzzed again in the background. I didn't check it. Not tonight. The first sign that something was brewing came 2 days later. Just after lunch, I was in the staff room rinsing out my salad container when the school secretary appeared in the doorway. She cleared her throat, the way people do when they're not sure whether to interrupt. "Claire," she said, "the principal would like to see you in her office." Hat. I dried my hands and followed her down the hallway, my mind already cycling through a dozen possibilities, none of which prepared me for what I heard once I stepped inside. The principal, Miss Hampton, closed the door behind me. She leaned forward, her voice measured but tinged with concern. "I received a phone call this morning from your sister and your mother. They claim you took Lily off school grounds without permission last weekend." I just stared at her for a moment, trying to process. "They said what?" She repeated it almost word for word. And for a second, it felt like the walls of her office were pushing in. It wasn't just a petty jab this time. It was an accusation that could cost me my job. But panic didn't come. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and scrolled through my messages. "Here," I said, handing it to her. The screen showed a text from Sophie, time-stamped for the same weekend they were talking about. "Thanks for taking Lily to the library today." She loved it, followed by a smiley face. Miss Hampton's eyebrows lifted. She read the text twice, then handed the phone back to me. Her lips curled into the faintest smile. "That's what I thought. I told them we'd handle it internally. But something about it didn't sit right. Thank you for clarifying." Her tone shifted. "Warmer now. Don't let this shake you. Your work here speaks for itself." When I stepped back into the hallway, the fluorescent lights seemed a little less harsh. Word had already started trickling out. A couple of colleagues stopped me by the copier, quietly letting me know they'd heard about the call and that they didn't believe a word of it. One parent caught me in the parking lot later that day, saying, "We know how much you care about these kids. Claire, don't let them make you doubt that." It didn't erase the sting completely, but it dulled it. For the first time in a long while, I realized I wasn't standing alone. People had been watching all along, not the way Sophie thought. Not waiting for me to slip, but noticing the small things, the early mornings, the extra help after school, the way I made sure every kid left with a book in their hands. As I left the building that afternoon, the sun was low in the sky, casting long golden stripes across the front lawn. I paused at the top of the steps, letting the light hit my face. It was the first time in weeks I felt like I could breathe without the weight of someone else's expectations pressing down. That evening, as I sat at my kitchen table with the sunlight still warming my shoulders, an idea took shape. Lily's birthday was coming up, and for once, I wanted to make it something magical, something that belonged just to her. I didn't want it to be about family politics, or who gave the biggest gift. I wanted her to feel like she was stepping straight into a storybook. The next morning, I pulled out a notebook and wrote 3 words across the top of the page: fairy tale birthday. Underneath, I scribbled ideas as quickly as they came to me: princess gowns, castles made of cardboard, a once-upon-a-time story corner, glittering crowns for every child. My pen moved faster than my coffee cooled. I decided the perfect place to host it wasn't some expensive party venue, but the community library. It had an open space that could be transformed, plus shelves full of the very stories we'd be celebrating. I called the librarian, Mrs. Green, who'd known me since I was a teenager, and asked if she'd let us use the main room for an afternoon. Without hesitation, she said yes. By Saturday morning, I was pushing a cart through the party store, filling it with pastel balloons, shimmering streamers, gold paper plates, and little wands made of ribbon and star-shaped foam. I found a pack of invitation cards that looked like tiny books, and spent the afternoon at my dining room table, handwriting each one in curling script. For the decorations, I wanted every corner of the library to tell part of the story. Near the entrance, there would be an archway of balloons in soft pink, lavender, and cream. To one side, a table covered in craft supplies, glue sticks, colored paper, and stickers, so the kids could make their own crowns. In the far corner, a story throne for me to read from, complete with a backdrop painted to look like an enchanted forest. I borrowed a projector to cast soft, twinkling lights across the ceiling. The librarian offered to help me set up, but I told her I wanted to do it myself. There was something deeply personal about this, like each piece I taped up was a stitch, repairing the fabric between Lily and me. On the day before the party, I hauled boxes of decorations into the library. The smell of books and the quiet hum of the air conditioning made it feel like a sanctuary. I set up the archway first, watching the colors bloom into place. Then I laid out the craft table, arranging the supplies in neat rows. As I draped the final strand of lights around the story corner, I stepped back and looked at the room. It wasn't just pretty, it felt alive, like a story was waiting to begin. I could almost see Lily walking in, her eyes going wide, her little hands reaching for the nearest crown. By the time I locked up, the sun was dipping low again, spilling gold through the library's tall windows. Standing there in that quiet room, I realized I hadn't thought about Sophie or my mother for hours. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about Lily and about choosing joy, even if I had to build it from scratch. The next afternoon, the library doors opened to a flutter of excitement. Parents guided little ones through the entrance, each child pausing under the pastel balloon arch, like they were stepping into another world. Lily came last, her hand in her grandmother's, wearing the pale blue gown we'd picked together. A silver tiara rested slightly crooked on her head, and when she spotted the crown-making table, her whole face lit up. Her friends scattered to the craft station, some already gluing sequins to paper crowns, others waving ribbon wands through the air. The sound of giggles and the rustle of tulle skirts filled the room. It felt like the library had come alive in a way I'd never seen before. Every shelf, every chair, every corner, humming with joy. I started with a story, Sitting in the story throne, I opened a big illustrated book and began. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a brave little girl. As I read, I shifted my voice for each character, a booming growl for the dragon, a delicate whisper for the fairy. The children leaned forward, eyes wide, hanging on every word. Lily sat cross-legged right at my feet, her hands folded in her lap, looking like she belonged in the story herself. After the tale ended, we played games, musical crowns, a treasure hunt among the bookshelves, a royal ball where the kids twirled to soft music. At one point, Lily took my hand and whispered, "This is the best day ever." I squeezed her fingers, holding on to that moment like it was something fragile. Parents gathered near the refreshment table, chatting and snapping photos, some of them exchanging glances with me that felt like quiet nods of approval. I could feel their warmth in a way I hadn't in weeks. It was as if all the whispers, all the doubts that had been swirling around me, had been pushed aside by. When it was time for cake, I dimmed the lights and carried it in. Candles glowing, everyone sang, their voices blending into something soft and almost tender. Lily closed her eyes before she blew out the candles. Her cheeks puffed, her lashes brushing her skin. I wondered what she wished for, though part of me hoped it was nothing more than for this day to last a little longer. We handed out slices of cake, and I found myself laughing easily, moving from table to table, making sure each child felt seen. The air smelled of frosting and balloons, that faint powdery scent that clings to party decorations. I wasn't thinking about the past weeks, or the accusations, or even what might come next. For those hours, there was only the present light spilling through the high windows, paper crowns askew on tiny heads, and Lily's voice calling for me from across the room. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was part of something good, something whole. As the children laughed and the music played, I caught a glimpse of someone standing near the back wall, half hidden in the shadow of a tall bookshelf. Sophie. She wasn't talking to anyone, just holding a paper cup in both hands, like she needed something to anchor herself. Her gaze wasn't darting around the room the way it usually did when she was trying to control the scene. It was fixed squarely on Lily. I watched her without letting it show, curious about why she was here at all. She hadn't been part of the planning, hadn't lifted a finger to help. But in that moment, her usual air of superiority seemed to slip. Lily was in the center of the room, still in her princess gown, clutching a ribbon wand in one hand. She spotted me across the crowd, her eyes lighting up, and she ran straight toward me. I crouched to meet her, and she threw her arms around my neck, laughing so hard, her little tiara tilted sideways. I could feel the warmth of her cheek against mine. I hear the rapid beat of her small heart. It was then that I saw Sophie's expression change. She blinked slowly, her lips parting just slightly, as if she was seeing something she hadn't expected. Her chin lowered, her eyes softened, and for a brief second, the sharpness I'd always known in her was gone. There was no jealousy, no smug calculation, just a quiet sort of recognition. She took a sip from her cup and glanced down at the floor. When she looked up again, her eyes found mine. She didn't smile, but she didn't frown either. It was more like an unspoken acknowledgement, a silent admission that whatever she had tried to undermine hadn't worked and maybe shouldn't have in the first place. The moment passed quickly. Someone called Sophie's name from the refreshment table, and she turned away, slipping her mask of composure back into place. But I couldn't unsee what had just happened. It wasn't victory in the way people usually think of it. It was quieter, gentler. It was the knowledge that the truth had shown itself without me forcing it, that the bond between Lily and me was visible to anyone who cared to really look. The rest of the party moved on. More games, more cake, the final round of musical crowns. But every so often, I'd catch Sophie's gaze drifting back toward us, not with the icy judgment I'd braced myself for, but with something closer to understanding. When the last child left and the decorations began to sag in the emptying room, I thought of that look. I didn't know what it meant for the future. Maybe nothing would change between us. Maybe everything would. But I did know this. No rumor, no whispered accusation could erase what Sophie had seen that afternoon, and that felt like enough. 3 years can change everything. And yet, when I look back, I can still smell the faint scent of balloons and frosting from that afternoon, but the life I live now feels like it belongs to another chapter entirely, one I built myself. Brick by brick. With no shortcuts and no apologies. The old library where I'd hosted Lily's birthday party closed down a year after that day. It broke my heart to see it boarded up. But it also gave me an idea that wouldn't leave me alone. I wanted to create a place where children could come not just to read, but to dream, build, paint, sing, anything that let them see themselves as more than a grade on a report card. It started small. I rented a modest space in an old brick building downtown. The kind with creaky floors and tall windows that let in more sunlight than I knew what to do with. I scraped together my savings, taught myself how to write a grant proposal, and filled out more paperwork than I thought a human soul could survive. Slowly, the Bright Path Creative Center took shape. Now, on most mornings, I unlock the door to the sound of early birds chirping in the maple tree outside. The air inside smells faintly of tempera paint and fresh coffee. Long wooden tables are covered with jars of markers, colored pencils, bits of yarn, beads, clay, anything a child might use to bring their ideas to life. The laughter starts early here. In one corner, I might have a group molding tiny animals out of clay, their hands messy, and their eyes focused with a seriousness only children can muster when they're lost in creation. In another corner, I'll hear the soft pluck of guitar strings as a shy 10-year-old learns her first chords. Sometimes we gather in the middle of the room for an impromptu storytelling circle, where even the quietest kid finds a way to make their voice carry. It's not just about the projects, it's about the way they look at themselves when they finish something. That quiet pride. That little spark of, I didn't think I could do this, but I did. And I keep a corkboard on the wall near my desk, covered in Polaroids of kids holding up their creations. Every so often, a parent will stop me to say their child has started drawing at home again, or that they're more confident speaking up in class. I nod and thank them. But inside, I'm a mess of gratitude, because I know how much I needed a place like this when I was young. Financially, it's not glamorous. I still do a lot of the cleaning myself. And I've learned to stretch a grant dollar until it squeaks. But I sleep well at night. I wake up with purpose. And I know that what I'm doing matters. Sometimes. Lily visits on Saturday mornings. She's taller now, her curls bouncing as she runs through the door. But she still calls my name the same way she did at the party. She'll sit cross-legged on the floor with the younger kids, helping them knot friendship bracelets or read from picture books. Watching her, I can't help but think that maybe she carries a piece of that day with her too. If there's one thing these 3 years have taught me, it's that independence isn't about doing everything alone. It's about building something that reflects who you are, and being brave enough to protect it. For me, the Bright Path is more than a center. It's proof that even when people doubt you, you can create something beautiful that no one can take away. And every time I lock the door at night, I know I've finally stepped into the life I was meant to live. It's strange how life can move in opposite directions under the same sky. While my world has been filling with color, music, and laughter, Sophie's has shifted into something far more muted. We don't see each other often, but the updates find their way to me through casual mentions, social media posts, or the occasional holiday gathering. Sophie works at a corporate office now, a tall glass building downtown with a lobby that smells of polished stone and burnt coffee. At first, she seemed excited. New clothes. A title she could drop into conversation. The kind of paycheck that sounded impressive. But over time, that spark dulled. Her emails to me turned shorter. Her voice on the phone more rushed. She complains about deadlines and difficult clients, about waking up before sunrise, just to sit in traffic for an hour, only to spend the day in meetings that lead to more meetings. When we do meet, I notice her eyes drifting to her phone, checking for messages from work, even on weekends. She's always tired now. Like the job doesn't just take her time, but her softness too. I can tell she's doing what she thinks she's supposed to do. Climbing a ladder that's harder and lonelier than she imagined. And I can't judge her for it. I've been there, the exhausting work of keeping up appearances while quietly wondering if you're climbing the wrong building altogether. As for our parents, little has changed. They still keep me at arm's length. Their conversations with me polite but measured. As though I'm a distant relative, they're not quite sure how to engage. They ask about the center in the same tone someone might use to ask about the weather, pleasant, but without real curiosity. I used to ache for their approval. To imagine a day when they would walk into the bright path and see the joy I've built and finally say they were proud. But somewhere along the way, I stopped waiting for that moment. It's not bitterness. And it's not resignation. It's something gentler, a quiet acceptance that people show love in the ways they know how. And sometimes those ways will never match what we wish for. I've learned that my worth isn't measured by how closely I fit into someone else's idea of success. Even if that someone is my own mother or father, there's a peace in letting go of the constant effort to prove myself to them. We still share meals on holidays. We still exchange gifts at Christmas. But I no longer walk away from those encounters carrying the heaviness of what's missing. I leave with the comfort of knowing I am enough. Even if they never see it. Every now and then, I catch Sophie watching me with an expression I can't quite read. Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe it's doubt. Maybe, somewhere deep down, it's envy. But she never says anything. And I don't press. I know that each of us has to come to our own turning point. And no one can force that realization on another person. Standing in the life I've built, I can see the distance between my world and theirs. But it no longer feels like a wound. It feels like a simple truth. Some paths stay parallel without ever crossing again. And that's okay. Because in the end, it's not about pulling everyone onto your road. It's about walking it fully. Even if you walk it alone. The sun was dipping low, spilling warm gold across my living room. I sat by the window, the wooden table in front of me, catching the last light of the day. Steam curled from a mug of tea, drifting lazily upward before disappearing into the quiet air. On the table lay a book, its cover soft and worn from years of handling. How to Grow Up. I'd bought it a long time ago. Back when I thought answers could be found neatly packaged in someone else's wisdom. For years, it sat untouched on a shelf, collecting dust. But tonight, without thinking, I reached for it. I flipped a few pages, skimming the highlighted sentences I'd once thought were revelations. They still carried meaning. But I realized something as I read. Most of what I truly needed to know hadn't come from books at all. It had come from living. From making choices no one understood. From falling flat on my face and standing up again. From being told, you can't, and quietly proving, to myself more than anyone, that I could. I set the book down, my fingers resting lightly on the cover. Outside, the sky deepened into shades of rose and violet, the kind of beauty you can't rush. I sipped my tea and let the stillness sink in. There was a time I believed growing up meant fitting into the mold others had prepared for me. That being successful was about pleasing the right people, saying yes when it was easier to say no, and wearing the life that fit their idea of me. But the truth is far simpler and far braver than that. Growing up, I've learned, isn't about living according to someone else's blueprint. It's about daring to live in a way that's undeniably yours. It's about choosing the path that keeps you awake at night in the best possible way. The one that scares you and excites you all at once. It's about making peace with the fact that not everyone will approve. And some will misunderstand you entirely. It's about loving them anyway. But loving yourself enough to keep going in the direction that feels right. I think of Sophie sometimes. Of my parents. Of all the years I spent trying to earn a nod. A smile. A word of approval. And I think of how light my heart feels now. No longer weighed down by that hunger. I am proud not because I fit their vision, but because I've honored my own. The sun slipped below the horizon. The light fading from the table. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the last warmth brush my skin. If I could leave just one truth behind, it would be this. Growing up isn't about becoming who they want you to be. It's about having the courage to be exactly who you are. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the faint hum of evening traffic. Life moving forward, as it always does. I smiled. I took another sip of tea and let the moment be.